Welcome to the Life Matters podcast with enlightening conversations on success and living well. My guests are all motivated by the desire to make a difference, and they share their wisdom, personal journeys, and a host of practical guidance that we can apply in our lives. Subscribe on your favourite platform and never miss an episode. Today, I'm joined by Charlie Flounders. Charlie's life has changed beyond imagination over the past year. During a photographic shoot, she experienced a traumatic, life-changing accident, resulting in her being airlifted to hospital and losing the sight in her right eye. Today, Charlie has recovered and is rebuilding a new life in which she inspires and offers hope to others. So welcome, Charlie. Thank you.
Hello. It's lovely to be here.
Lovely to have you. So could we perhaps start by talking about your life and work up until the point of the accident?
Yes. Feels like a completely different life now, actually. But yeah, I think the words that come to mind when I describe it were full, busy, driven, abundant. I started out my working life in the recycling industry and worked for 20 years in various different roles, always client-facing, and lots of kind of negotiation, sales of a certain type, marketing. But whilst I was doing that, always in the background was this rumbling of creativity, wanting to do something more creative. When I left school, I got myself a place on a fine art degree, and my family convinced me not to do that because at the time, and they were probably right at the time, but they told me artists can't make money. Go and get a proper job. So I went and got a proper job, and then 20 years on, decided to leave said proper job to set up my own creative business. And that was it was a photography business. So for quite some years, about 8 or 9 years, I started taking photography seriously, learning my craft and my trade, and not really believing that I could make a business out of it. And then through meeting various people and immersing myself in that world more, surrounding myself actually by photographers who were already doing it and already making money from it, I discovered that perhaps I could make it a business. Decided to stick it to the corporate man and left the corporate world 5 years prior to my accident, so 6 years ago now. And I set up my own business, which was effectively 2 different brands. One of them was working with families and as a wedding photographer. And then the other, about 50-50 income-wise, was corporate and commercial photography. So working with businesses to help them tell their stories online and to help them show up in a way that they loved and was authentic and made them feel confident about their own marketing and their own branding. And in doing that, both of those businesses were super successful. I was fully booked. It was a growth trajectory. Firefly Productions, which was my corporate side, was starting to become an agency. I was starting to need more people to help me do the work that was coming to me, which was amazing. And that's what took me to the photo shoot where my accident happened.
Okay. Can you tell me about that day? Where were you?
Yes. So I was working for a client that I'd worked for many times before. They work in quite an industrial setting, and I'm going to be careful about what I say because there's still legalities around what happened that stopped me from going into fine detail. But we were doing an industrial photo shoot on a big, huge kind of industrial ferry in the German/Danish sea. So they flew me out there to photograph and film their products being used. At the end of the story, the accident was there was a hose which was connected to one of their products. It had compressed air in it, which was very, very fast flowing air, high pressured, and it popped off the tool that it should have been connected to, whipped around and smashed me in the face.
Goodness.
That tool had a big metal clip on the end of it, and that clip went into my eye. So the tool came up across my the hose came up across my face, fractured bones here. For those listening, chin, cheek, and all around my eye socket. And it actually exploded my eyeball, just the sheer pressure of the impact.
My word. So what happened next? Can you even remember?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, actually, on impact, obviously it hurt a lot and I screamed and, the various things that you would do if you were hit. But I was very kind of with it, very compos mentis, and I met an incredible version of myself. And she still amazes me today, actually, thinking about it. A very calm, very loud, very sensible voice, obviously inside my head, that said, okay, this is not ideal, but we need to stay calm. We need to keep our blood pressure and our heart rate low. Panicking is not the thing to do right now. So I kind of was reminded of a lot of tools that I'd already learned around breath work and keeping calm. And I sat down whilst there was a lot of panic going on around me and did box breathing and just made sure that I kept my heart rate low, to the point where the people around me were like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm fine. I'm trying not to freak out."
Yeah. Amazing that you had that resourcefulness and
Yeah.
awareness to do that.
Yeah, and I often think about this. It wasn't really a conscious thing to do, although I was kind of talking to myself. That voice was there already, which, yeah, that was quite amazing. We were at sea at the time. It took about 20 minutes to get back to port, and the guys with me said, "There's going to be an ambulance there when we get there." And I said, "Oh, don't be daft. I don't need an ambulance. It's fine." And they were like, "No, you really do," because they could see, obviously, what the injury looked like more than I could. I got into the land ambulance. They took one look and said, "Yeah, we're not the right kind of ambulance. We need an air ambulance to get you to the right hospital quick enough." And at that point, I started to realize this sounds kind of serious. Yeah, so there was kind of lots of different layers of what happened beyond that. Obviously getting to hospital, contacting my family. I was rushed into emergency surgery that evening because at that time they couldn't actually see an eyeball in my eye socket. So they took me into emergency surgery to recover what they could or find out what was going on. And a really very clever surgeon did find said eyeball in many pieces and he found it, pulled it back together and stitched it together. And the way that is perhaps easiest to explain so people can understand a little bit is if you can imagine having an orange or a satsuma and it being on the table, if you smashed down on it and squished it very hard, all of the juice from inside would need a way to get out. So the skin would tear in many different ways and the innards would squirt out without being too gory. That's effectively what happened to my eye. So the outer edge of the eyeball was still there, but it was torn in all sorts of different ways. And this very clever man managed to pull it back together and stitch it in such a way and reattach muscles so that the eyeball is still, or was still intact, and the muscles are still intact, so it still moved. But what I found out the following morning when he explained what he'd done was that all of the working parts inside the eye had gone. He just didn't know where they were. And so, yeah, then there were obviously more and more layers of what happened, what news was given to me at what point beyond that. But the long and short of the story is I am now completely blind in that.
And when you got that news, I mean, you've been so composed up to this point and keeping it together. Was that the point where, or maybe you didn't have any kind of meltdown? Perhaps you did. I don't know.
Well, it's strange. The news came to me in layers, and that was across 2 or 3 weeks. So the news that next morning was, we found the edges of your eye. We've put the ball back together. What needs to happen now is it needs to settle down. And in 2 weeks' time, someone needs to go back into the eye and see what can be recovered. So it wasn't, you're never going to see again at that point. So I was very emotional at times. I spent a week in the German hospital before I came home. I was very emotional at times, but I was also trying to hold on to some hope that it wasn't the end for that eye. And I was in very much practical mode. So his thoughts were that the surgeon that goes back into the eye would probably be better to be in the UK because then I would have more continuity in aftercare beyond that if there were more operations that were needed or what have you. So really the first task was to work out how I get home, which surgeon can treat me, how I get back into the NHS, having not arrived at the NHS, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And there were just a million things to sort out. So alongside feeling absolutely gutted and not sure what was going on, I messaged friends and told them I was 60% brave warrior and 40% blubbering mess.
Wow, how incredible. And what about getting home? How was it for your family? And at that point, I mean,
well, yeah, it was tricky. My partner was at home with my 13-year-old son, and he had various work commitments, and my son had other, he was just going back to school. It was difficult for them to jump out to Germany. But my sister is a trained crisis medic in the military, and she managed to jump on a plane the morning after my accident and be with me for the whole week. So I had my own private medic sat with me. And she was absolutely incredible. She was helping me not only understand the medical stuff that we were being told and that was going on, she was looking at my notes and telling me what everything meant, but she was also in communication with hospitals back in the UK here to work out how best to get me to the right place. And because it was quite a specialist injury, there were actually only a few surgeons in this country that could deal with it. So together we moved mountains to find the right person and get an appointment to go to Moorfields in London, which is a specialist eye hospital.
Yeah.
So I came back on the Friday, spent a couple of days at home, and then went to Moorfields. And that's where I received the final news after a day of being looked at, that they didn't feel there was any point in going back in to try and retrieve what was there, because what was there was so very damaged. But my retina, the bit at the back of the eye that processes the image that you see, was scrumpled up in a tiny ball, as they described it. So that was the difficult day, with like final news and hope removed. And that was an emotional one.
I'm not surprised.
But I would say that actually the flood of emotions didn't really come for another week or two after that. There was a period of time where I was just, I guess, in absolute shock, trying to get my head around what had happened, because it had happened so quickly. I was so very excited to go to that shoot. It was a huge adventure to be somewhere different and on a ship. And yeah, it was just such a lot to get my head around that it kind of gradually came in waves, I think.
Understandably. So what has the recovery journey been like? Because this happened in, what was it, August 24, so just over a year.
Yes. So we're 13-ish months in. It's been a wild ride. It's basically the best way to describe it. It's been an undulating kind of path of ups and downs and emotions and joy and gratitude and sadness and pretty much every emotion that you could imagine, actually. So when I first got home, there was a lot of physical healing to do. My face was incredibly bruised. There was lots of broken bones, and there was lots of eye drops and all sorts of things to do. The one thing that surprised me the most was how much sleep I needed. Incredible amounts of sleep. I would sleep all night and get up and try and help my son get ready for school, and half an hour of doing that and I'd need to go back to bed. So there was a lot of learning to be gentle with myself, which is not something that I was used to in quite a fast-paced, demanding life previously.
Yes.
And then after getting through that initial period of physical healing, there was a period where I was ready and had a bit more energy, ready to kind of go out of my home and be back in the world. And that was a really unnerving time, because everything was really scary. I had a completely new perspective, physical, what I could see, as well as mental. But I had to relearn how to do everything.
Really?
From walking up and down my stairs, to pouring water into a glass, to getting around my house without bashing my face on a cupboard, to then when I was out. So in my house, after a little while, it became easy, because you kind of know where things are in your house and you can sense your way around a little bit. But outside, there was an extra layer of, it's a bit like when you're driving, hazards all around. You learn to drive and they teach you that you have to have eyes everywhere to see what's going on. Now, all of a sudden, I became super conscious and aware of what might be in my blind spot that I haven't seen. And not only that, but also your depth perception is really affected. And so, again, steps, uneven floor, dark, going from light to dark is quite difficult. It takes time for my eye to readjust. What I didn't realize is when we have two eyes, our two eyes are constantly working with each other to adjust for what is happening in one eye and not the other. To give that some kind of context, to make it more understandable, if the sun is shining in my good eye now, if it shines in a certain angle, I literally can't see anything. If I had two eyes, if it shined in my left eye in that way and blinded that eye, my right eye would probably be in a shadow from my nose or at a different angle, and the right eye would take over, so I'd still be able to see. But because I don't have both of those eyes, I literally just can't see until I shadow the sun out of my eye, and then it's okay. But we don't know this is happening when we have two eyes, right?
No.
They're constantly feeding back to one another to, oh, what can you see? Shall I overtake a little bit or shall you do the hard work? But obviously that can't happen anymore for mine. So there was a big period of readjustment.
Yes. And no one could prepare you for that.
Well, no one told me about it. But yes, you're right. No one, I feel like maybe someone could have prepared me. I feel like what I looked for immediately while I was in Germany, I hopped online on Instagram and TikTok and anywhere I could look to find other people who were in my shoes but slightly further down the line. To kind of go, okay, the doctors are telling me in 3 months' time, this eye will have readjusted. My brain will have readjusted and I'll be okay. But I didn't really believe that at that time. I wanted to see people that were further down the line that could show me it was absolutely fine. I think I couldn't find anyone apart from a couple of people in America who were much further down the line, who weren't really sharing the bit that I was at. What would have been super valuable was to have somebody who was maybe a year on or 6 months on going, oh yeah, that's a thing. And this is how I got around that thing. But it didn't exist.
So you really were in uncharted territory, literally. And that just adds to the stress and the worry, I imagine, because you still don't know. You haven't got that reassurance from someone saying, oh, well, I know what to expect.
Yeah. I was very much feeling my way physically a lot of the time, but yeah. Yeah, in every sense. And during that period when I was kind of out and about and realized, oh my God, this is really quite scary, I had a realization, and that was all of this is going to be really scary for a little while. But the scary things, surely if I do them once or twice and retrain myself how to do them, they won't be scary anymore. All I need to do is teach myself that these things are still safe. And again, to put into context, one of the things that made me realise was we went out for a meal. So we went to a local pub the first time I'd been out. And that pub is a really old kind of Tudor thatched building. So it's quite dark and quite wibbly wobbly. And we were at one end and I had to walk all the way through the pub to get to the loo. I needed to go to the loo. Said to my family, no, it's fine. I can go, no problem. And I got halfway through the pub and thought, oh my God, I can't even go to the loo. I can't even get there without bumping into someone, or I just felt really unsteady. And that evening I thought, yeah, this is going to happen a lot now. But each time I do that and train myself it's safe, it will be okay. So I almost subconsciously set myself a task of, right, if I'm going to feel fear and uncomfortable and scared, I better just get on with it and do as many of those difficult things as possible. Let's get all the fear out of the way, and then surely I'll get over a hump and feel better. And so that's what I did for the next 5 or 6 weeks or so, just challenged myself a lot with all of the things that felt really scary. And I learned that the fear doesn't go away. You just have to push through it, take the fear with you. Obviously not be reckless, but yeah, it was about kind of getting hold of that thought of I can't do this or this is scary, and saying, it's okay, we're safe, we'll just keep doing it, keep practicing, and then build some more neural pathways and be on our way.
Well, I think that's incredible, because I have to say, sitting here, that I do not think that I would have been able to have taken that approach. So all credit to you, Charlie, all credit to you. I just think that is amazing. So
one of the things,
this must have changed you as a person.
Oh,
has it?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, I feel like other people might think it's dramatic of me to say, but I'm just literally not the same person whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. In a lot of positive ways, but I just have so much new information about myself and about the world that I just can't possibly think or feel anything that I did about the world in the same way. It's quite a strange feeling, actually. I've got now having look, I'm not through it. I'm still working through it. It's a really, really long journey, but having worked through it to the place I'm at now, I have a kind of unwavering self-confidence that, wow, if I can get through that, it's easily the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life. If I can get through that, then I can do pretty much anything.
What's happened to your career then? I mean, once you start to deal with the physical recovery, you then presumably start turn your attention to more practical aspects of the future and my life and so on. So what's that going to
So
unfold for you like, do you think?
for about 4 or 5 months, I was what I would call deep in the trenches of physical healing, all of the recovery that we've just talked about, but also processing the grief and the loss. I allowed myself, in a way that I haven't ever allowed myself, I don't think, to come inward and effectively hibernate. And obviously, because of my circumstances, the world and everybody around me also allowed that, which is something that I don't think you get normally. And during that time, after lots of processing and grief and work on acceptance was the key. Then I could start to look forward. And in the springtime, I started to feel like, okay, let's try and work out what the future holds. And there were things about my business that I just couldn't do anymore. I've completely stopped wedding photography because it's demanding. I can still use my cameras really well, but the physical demands of being in very busy places, having to be very nimble, having to be up ladders, photographing 50 people in a group photo, and just various things about wedding photography make that element of work difficult. I'm probably not going to be going on ships and doing much industrial photography again for a while. So there was a lot of decisions to make about what from my old life am I keeping and bringing forwards? What do I want to keep? What do I need to keep? And actually, what is okay to fall away? And that was a big process in itself, because allowing my baby that I'd created and built for 5 years and took a huge risk for, to leave corporate life and build up this new thing. And I'd put a lot of my identity around that. To let that fall away was a process. And I'm not a particularly patient person. So for a while there, I was battling with, no, I just want to be the new me already. I just want to get all of this sorted in my head and show up in the world in the new way, and this not be a problem anymore. But what I realized, I actually saw a social media post about, I was seeing lots of things about becoming a new you. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe that's what I'm doing. I'm becoming. But then I saw a post about, before the becoming, there has to be an unbecoming, an undoing. And I thought, yes, that's what we're in now. We're in the trenches of undoing.
Yes.
And yeah,
That's creating space, isn't it?
yeah. It's hard though. It's sad. And there's, a lot of doubt and almost anxiety around, well, if I let all this go, then what comes in its place? And how do I pay the bills? And yeah. But
I think I would have possibly been very angry as well. Did you have that?
yes, yeah, and still do. There's a huge amount of anger there because the accident wasn't my fault. So I can't really, again, for legal reasons, I can't really say much more than that. But yeah, there's anger around not being looked after perhaps in the way that I could or should have been, anger around how I let myself even get on that ship. Why, all the questions in your head, why did I do that? Anger around, this isn't what I chose, I don't want to be here, this wasn't part of the plan, all sorts of things that come through your head, and that sits in your body. I found a lot. I was holding a lot of tension, and so I've done lots of incredible kind of somatic work and yoga and acupuncture and all sorts of things to help me not only release it from my mind but get rid of it from my body too.
Sounds like a really good thing to be doing, because things do stay on in the body, don't they?
Yeah, and I've had situations in in the past in my life where I think my tendency is to, be quite stoic, keep calm and carry on, brush it under the carpet, put that in a little box and we'll be okay, keep busy, move on. And I was really acutely aware that that actually doesn't work very well, doesn't serve me very well. And so this time I wanted to let myself feel all of those feelings and process it. But there was a slight hesitance about doing that because I was scared that if I let myself cry and be upset or be angry, then I'd get lost in that and I wouldn't be able to pull myself back.
Yes.
But that's actually not happened. I'm surrounded by lots of amazing, wise people, and some of them said, well, maybe you should just try it, see if you can get back out. And I
Yes.
did.
Because even as you're telling the story, I feel that there's almost, not you're diminishing it, but it's almost like you don't want to really go there. And I don't want you to go there either.
Well,
You
a
know what I
blubbering
mean?
mess isn't the
No,
great look for a podcast.
but no, but you know what I'm saying. And I do think that, I think even women particularly, it's not okay for us to have certain emotions. And so we learn to express sometimes through smiles even, and laughing about things that actually aren't things to smile and laugh about.
No, you're right.
I'm very guilty of that. I know that. So I certainly recognize it when somebody else is doing it. And of course, you have a son, and you have a young son. And I suppose a huge part of that was being strong and brave for him so that he felt safe and didn't worry.
Yeah.
Of course, he
Yeah.
would.
Yeah. And, it's been a journey for all of us, of course. One thing I realized when I got home and was really poorly was quite how much the holder and keeper I was of the emotions in our household. And at that time, I had no space for anyone else's emotions. I had enough of my own that were kind of overflowing, to let myself completely switch off from holding any emotion of my son and my partner was difficult. And I think it was difficult for them. And my son actually was amazing and lovely. And then 5 or 6 months later, really started talking about the anger that he had about the situation. He was angry at the people that I was with. He was angry at various different things. And that we went through a process. I had a counsellor at the time, which I managed to talk to about, I don't know how to hold that for him, how to support
Yeah.
him through that. And we worked out various different things. Yeah. And my poor old partner, for probably 3 months, heard nothing else come out of my mouth other than talking about what I was experiencing at the time, because it's all consuming, or it certainly was for me. So I now realize in hindsight that that must have been, he was fine. He was great, supportive. He didn't ever complain about me speaking about this, but probably in the background must have been like, oh God, can we can we not talk about something else?
So one of the things that occurs to me is you said there was no one to follow. There was no one that you could find that was further down the path than you to offer you that hope and comfort and even some guidance. So is that something that, is that part of the reason for being on this podcast, Stephen? You want to share that message and offer that hope to
Yeah,
people?
absolutely. I'm still trying to piece together the best way to do that. But I feel now, having been through this, I've got this box of treasure almost of this new chunk of wisdom and knowledge and advice and experience that not that many people have. And I feel like just to keep that all to myself almost feels selfish at this point, when I know how I felt at the time, and that I really would have loved somebody to be able to share just small snippets of that information. And I think it also applies to people not just that have lost sight in one eye. Anyone going through something shocking or traumatic or processing grief. Yes, I lost a body part, but it was very similar to if somebody had died. There's so many similarities. So yeah, I would love to show up for some of the people behind me, as it were. And that might take various forms, but public speaking to businesses about how to support and help people that have been through traumatic experiences, speaking on inclusion and diversity. There's so much support out there for people who have been blinded in both eyes, but literally nothing if you've lost one eye. We're
I
not
didn't know that.
classed we're not classed as disabled. If your working eye still has good vision, you're not even classed as partially sighted, which to me is very strange. Because if you ask anybody, what would be a definition of somebody who's partially sighted? I think they'd probably say somebody with one eye. So, yeah, speaking to businesses, speaking to wellness events about processing trauma, but also I'd like to find a way to speak to those people who have been through exactly what I've been through. So that might be creating some content that speaks directly to that. It might be writing a book. It might be having my own podcast. I've got a million ideas. But yeah, I would really like to show up for people in a way that I think is now very useful and needed.
Definitely. Well, I think you are a remarkable person. Thank you for sharing your story today. I think you're very brave. And I think also that what's very inspiring is that you have somehow, through all of this, emerged and are emerging into, well, watch this space, I think, because I'm sure you're going to help an awful lot of people with your story. How can people connect with you, please?
I live kind of spiritual home is on Instagram, Charlie Flounders on Instagram. I have a website, which is charlieflounders.com, and people can learn about all of the different ways that they can engage with me on my website. And yeah, I would put that call out if anybody's listened to my words and thinks that they would be useful or that they would touch somebody that they know or an audience that they have, then I would love to hear from them and talk about how we might get that message out to those people.
I think it's so important. And thank you for today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Well, thank you, Diane. It's lovely to be here.